ICQ Podcast episode 342, Improving Your Handy Talkie. Well, hello, good day, and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 342nd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on how to improve your Handy Talkie. Well, as always, we're an advert-free show, so it's our donors that keep us, working away and paying our bills on the internet, and we'd like to thank our monthly and subscription donors for helping us out. If you'd like to support the show and show the value you got from what we do, all you need to do is visit icqpodcast.com/donate. We'll say whatever value you find in the show, put a numerical value on it and send it along to us, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Well, let's move on now with the show, and we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Ed, Frank and Bill to discuss the latest amateur radio news and generate thoughts about what's going on in our hobby, as they look at a new WSJT mode and funds raised for healthcare heroes. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to this episode's ICQ podcast, episode 342, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi Chris.
Hi Martin. Hi guys. Hope you're all doing okay.
Yeah, we're ducking and diving as well, Chris. I also have Mr. Martin Rothwell, which I'm never sure whether you're going to try and get me into trouble or not, Martin, but how are you doing?
Just to confirm, Martin, what episode number is this? Is it 342 or 432?
342, Chris.
Just checking we didn't have any edit points there that were difficult to edit out.
Well, one or the other, you know. It's some kind of podcast sometime in the future, somewhere about now, you know. I don't know.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Okay. We also got Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Evening all.
Evening, Ed. You do your Dixon and Doc Green impersonation very well. Moving to the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
Hey, Martin.
Yeah.
Leslie Butterfield and I got a New Year's resolution to bring back the Street Stooges. We got an opening for Curly. You fancy a go, mate?
I'll give anything a go, mate. I mean, I haven't got curly hair. I ain't got much hair, but I've got some.
Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you, Frank. And last but not least, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, who hasn't been hijacked by his company today. Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hello, Martin. Good evening, everybody.
And good to have all of you with us. Well, some of you might have worked out from the edit points mentioned by Mr. Rothwell. I can't. My brain's not in gear tonight, so I apologise in advance. What I have noticed, though, for our first news story, a new WSJT mode, which is now Q65's just come online. Bill, do you want to go first on this one, Bill?
Yeah, this is exciting. They're working on a new mode in WSJTX called Q65. It's going to be digital protocol designed for the minimal two-way QSOs over especially difficult propagation paths. Read that as EME, the various kinds of scatter you get through the troposphere, ionosphere, VHF, that kind of stuff. It's different but similar to QRA 64. The big thing I noticed, aside from using the same format that like FT4 and FT8 uses for messages and sequencing, they actually set it so it has various transmit and receive cycle lengths of 15, 30, 60, 120, or 300 seconds. That might be really interesting for EME, especially the longer ones. And they suggested in the quick start guide, which I recommend anyone that's interested in this to take a look on. They actually have, for instance, 60-second Q65 mode for EME on 2 meters 70 sems, a modified 60-second mode for EME on 1.2 gigs, 120-second cycle for what they call small dish EME. That's when you don't have your huge gain antennas. You have a more modest gain antenna, I think, on 10 gigs. So there's a lot of possibilities here. So it would be very interesting to find some folks that do the EME and the meteor scatter, or not really meteor scatter, just scatter modes like tropospheric and that kind of stuff, to see how they end up using this mode in their as they're trying to work stations, and see if they can get some new records here.
Yeah, as I say, it's a new mode for the boys that do troposcatter and EME, so that sounds good. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's interesting, and one comment I have is it seems to be that the team that works with Joe Taylor are trying to add more and more and more modes under the same interface through the WSJTX program. So I guess once you know one mode, you can move on to the others if it's something of interest to you. Obviously, meteor scatter and Earth, Moon, Earth is very specialized, and you have to have a lot of other equipment as well to be able to do that, not just the software. But the fact that they're using the same interface is good. I just hope they aren't putting preset frequencies in there for this mode, because this mode needs to go wherever your radio is going. And it does say it's mainly for VHF and up. This isn't something, this mode, you're not going to bump into this mode on 20 meters. It's going to be more UHF and SHF. But as always with everything from Joe Taylor, I said it's very well documented. And the fact that they are using the same interface means that whatever cabling you've already got between your computer and rig is going to still work the same. So, yeah, well done. And I wonder what comes next.
Yeah, that's the big question, Ed, of what comes next. Martin, you're a VHF and UHF man. Are you going to have a go at EME or any of this troposcatter?
No, I read this. Oh, good. Another digital mode, just what we need. Minimal two-way QSOs, it says it's a digital protocol designed for minimal two-way QSOs over especially difficult propagation paths. That sounds very much like FT8 call or JS8 call or whatever they're calling it now. I know people love Joe Taylor. He kind of got my back up a little bit when he was quoted as telling people they couldn't use earlier versions of the software because it was not compatible with the latest versions of the software and the transmissions it put out. I forget what current protocol it was. But that aside, how do we recognize half these modes? If you've got one application that can decode anything, and not just things that Joe Taylor and his group of people have written, but any kind of digital mode that is on the air and will auto switch between them, yeah, okay, great. I know Ham Radio Deluxe used to do that, but you had to manually recognize the thing and then change it across. But otherwise, you're going to tune through the band. You're going to hear a different signal. What the hell is this? What software do I need to decode it? You need to know where to be looking. Yes, you've got band plans, but how do I know whether this is an FT8, a WSPR, a PSK, or whatever? I don't know. Will I be trying it? No, I'm just not excited by this. I'm sorry, but that's my own feelings on this.
Well, that's fine. It's your opinion, and we can't all love everything. There was a smartphone app we talked about within the last year that you could run on your smartphone, and it would tell you, it would recognize the mode. It wouldn't decode it, but it would recognize the mode. And I can't remember what it was called, but I know we talked about it at one point in time. So that might be a way of working out what's on
for the radio manufacturers to think about in their maybe not the older radios, but certainly the new radios that come out, the SDR stuff. Maybe it's a plugin that they could sort of differentiate and say, hey, this is a X mode.
Well, there is an app. I think it's the app called Signal ID, which I think I've got on my phone. Actually, in fact, I got it here. Which I'm not sure it recognises the different FT modes, but certainly it gives you a good idea of trying to figure out what's being heard, what's being sent.
Oh, that'd be great to be added into WSJTX then, wouldn't it? Again,
Yeah.
all in one interface. Then you say, okay, decode it. You work out what it is.
But can it do other things like SSTV, Olivia, PSK?
Not in WSJTX, it wouldn't, but at least it's taking care of the Joe Taylor modes, if not anything else.
FL Digit is going more in that direction than anything else.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say, Frank. FL Digi on most of the modes, it will transmit basically a mode identifier, and then your FL Digi will switch to it. But the Joe Taylor WSJTX stuff is based on timing. So I don't think they'll ever, well, I don't want to say ever, but it seems unlikely that they'd be able to prepend a signal identifying noise and not screw up the timing.
Just looking at Signal ID. Sorry, this will recognise RTTY, something called Stanag 4285. Never heard that before. FT4 and FT8. So those four, and I guess others maybe in the future.
Yeah. Frank, you haven't had much of a go because you were in the background when people were discussing. What's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think my initial comment was going to be very much in line with Martin Rothwell's, in that, we typically have the ARL over here, perhaps the RSGB on your side of the pond, and others have a band plan. We're going to need to have a Joe Taylor plan. Points out each mode they've come up with and what the good, the upside is. But having said that, that's a good kind of criticism when someone's putting a lot of things out there. Point number two is, and I think our discussion is centered on this isn't just a one ham endeavor. You got to have someone else out there who's using the same mode. So you have to have some coordination. And I think this raises that question. As Bill and I sort of said, the software FL Digi has sort of gone along the spirit of what we were encouraging, and it's gotten as much into frequency measurement and some other tools built into it. And I will say that the WSJT stuff is out there, in which another piece of software is certainly free to adopt and use that signal IDing stuff. If you get over into the world of listening, and I hesitate just to say shortwave listening, but signal identification is a big deal. And I think there's a project, I think it's called Artemis, and it's basically a collection of things about a given protocol that you can look and see in a waterfall, and it'll help you visually identify it. But this is more or less automating that. And the final thing, two things actually. I think when the sunspot cycle goes up, you're going to see some of these digital modes kind of lose ground in popularity, because people are going to talk on sideband because they can now. They're going to do a little more CW because they can get further. So this won't go away, but I think it won't be quite as popular. The thing that I took note, a little bit in contrast to Ed's comments, was pointing out how using a small Yagi and at least going 100 watts, 6 meters, you might get 1,000, 1,500 or so kilometers in dead band conditions. And, that might be kind of useful, particularly for SOTA activations and some things like that. So more of the same, more stuff to learn.
Yeah, well, as I say, some interesting points being raised by all of you. And, my point was earlier on is, how many more are they going to release? And as you said, if you have set frequencies for all these different modes, we're going to fill our band up with Joe Taylor modes. There you go. Well, the next news story. Okay, boys, I've heard it's not real radio. I know it's not real radio, but it's another tool to your arsenal. You now can listen to digital modes on any Android device. Well, I go one further than that, because I'm sure I had it transmitting as well. But there's a new Android app called DroidStar that allows you to do the main digital modes. Now, Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it could be a useful thing. I've seen a previous app, which looks very similar, called Peanut, which I played with a while ago. And I have heard people on DMR and other, I think DMR, possibly D-Star, I can't remember now, one of the digital modes, one of the digital voice modes, and they were talking about Peanut, and you wouldn't know they were on a phone. You know, they could have been on a you know, any of the endpoints, whether it's a Handy Talkie via a hotspot or via a repeater or in a car or whatever. So it's just another way of doing it, isn't it? I mean, it's a hobby, so you know, it's a, you know, it's a cheap way of getting onto DMR if you want to have a play around with it, or onto the other digital modes. You know, have a listen and see what's going on. If you don't want to invest the money in buying the kit and you want to just have a listen around, or even talk on there and just dip your toe in the water and see what it's all about, then why not?
Well, I managed to get my phone onto the Brandmeisters network and Fusion at the weekend, so I was quite just interested in seeing what it was doing. Yeah, it will get you on, as Chris said, if you want to try out a mode or you want to hear what's on a mode. You know, is it worth buying a particular digital radio? Well, it gives you a chance to have a listen around and try what you're going to hear before you put your hand in your pocket. Martin, I guess you wouldn't be that excited about this.
Is it worth buying a particular digital radio? Depends on what coverage is in your area, because if you've only got a DMR repeater in your area, you are not going to have very much fun with a D-Star or a Fusion radio. That's what I always tell people when they're buying digital radios. Look what you've got the coverage for in your area and consider buying the radio that will work with that. I am actually quite excited about that. I have the technology for D-Star, Fusion, and to some extent DMR as well, and I can listen to stuff. I do, however, use Peanut. Not so much recently because I've been working from home, but I have used Peanut fairly extensively on my phone in the past. I do still hear people on D-Star talking about using Peanut. So it is still there. And yeah, you wouldn't necessarily know that they are using a phone and an app. It sounds just as good. I'd be interested that I could perhaps install this on my Android phone that I use, or my Android radio that I use for Zello. So this could be exciting. It's interesting that it's worded in here. It doesn't require any silly remote ambi servers. I don't know where that was copied from, but I'm pretty sure Peanut runs on a... Does that run on ambi? I don't know how that works, but it's interesting. I'm sure I don't think you necessarily need the ambi chip anymore to do it. I think you can do it in software now. But either way, all digital modes use servers. I know that. I've got one in my house. It's running the digital side for GB3 XP. The only other thing I'd say on this, I know you talk about being able to access like DMR Brandmeister via this app, but if you have a high-tier phone, PNC 550 or a 760, like the really high-end ones, you can actually use it to connect to the Brandmeister network without a radio. It does it all via IP on the phone. I've seen people do it on YouTube. I can't work out how they've done it because there's no real documentation that tells you how to run it, but I know it's possible. So I'd be interested to see perhaps this is running in the background like on IP and it can talk directly to the servers like that. I don't know. Interesting to know.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And in fairness, I know Ed was saying he had problems getting it working, and I'll pass it to you in a minute, Ed, but it is still in beta, so don't get overexcited just yet. It worked for me. Some of the other guys haven't managed to get it to work yet, but then they may be on older versions.
Sorry, yeah, just looking at the website of Dudetronics, which is where the DroidStar app is comes from. There's a very small page there. It talks about the modes and things. It says currently supports RX of D-Star, DMR, Fusion, NXT, and MP25. TX of all modes except D-Star using software vocoding is currently supported. So it is, apart from D-Star, it looks like it's doing that vocoding, which is what the Ambi chip does in software rather than traditionally on a chip. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Over to you, Ed.
Yeah, a couple of points. First of all, just point out we're talking about digital voice here when we're saying digital modes. The last news item was digital data. And what Martin just said as well, this is still beta code. You actually get an invitation to help testing the code when we install it. I downloaded and installed it about 10 days ago. Spent a couple of days trying to get it to work on any mode. Nothing worked. Specifically, I was concentrating on DMR because I wanted to get to a particular DMR talk group. Now, Martin tells me he installed it this last weekend, and the first thing it did was install an update. So, and he's had success. So it could very well be whatever was stopping me from getting access has now been fixed. So I need to go back and try again. It is interesting that the big thing that was always said about the AMBI chips is it's licensed code. You have to pay for it. You pay a license. It's a commercial product. If it's now being done in software, I wonder if there's a software license being paid or whether there's some way around it that they've found. Because if it turns out to be that, you know, somebody's written the code, the vocoder code, and it gets around it in some way, then there might be some legal issues down the road. Whether it's actually maybe going direct VoIP into some of the servers within each of these networks, and therefore it actually doesn't need to generate the digital audio that you would have on a transmitting device, because remember, using the phone, you're going straight into the internet in this case. Perhaps that's how they're doing it. Perhaps they're going into, if you like, the back doors of some DMR servers and Fusion servers and D-Star servers and so on. Also mentioned here, interestingly, is that it also covers M17, which is the open source FreeDV Codec 2 implementation. So that one they wouldn't have a legal problem with, but the ones that use AMBI, yeah, if they are actually vocoding to AMBI and then going into the system, then somebody should be paying a license, I suspect. So my suspicion is that they're actually going directly into the IP infrastructure and therefore don't need to encode. And I've got something doing the decoding automatically as well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I say that's good, and say I was surprised. I tried it. It worked for me on the two modes. I didn't try D-Star, but obviously D-Star doesn't work on transmit at the time of recording. So, what's your thoughts, Frank?
Well, it's interesting. I tried it just before the recording here and didn't give it, fair justice. I will say this. For the listener who wants to say, hey, I've got a piece of software, I'll learn about D-Star, DMR, Fusion, etc. by this app. No. Because you have to understand the nomenclature of these different modes to set the app up. So just keep that in mind. Point number two, and I want to try to unravel this. I was, how do you say it? I was on another network a few years ago, and I was interviewing Ray Novak of ICOM. And we were talking about, I called him the Pied Piper of D-Star, where he sort of promoted D-Star from ICOM, et cetera. And there's a funny little nuance that many hams get confused. And that is the D-Star standard is not proprietary. However, Texas Instruments having code, as Ed discussed, burned into a chip to encode, not necessarily decode, but to encode transmission in that chip is proprietary. Here's a parallel. I think this is the case. I can be corrected. I think there was a lawsuit a few years ago, and the popular song Jingle Bells, often sung at Christmas, the lyrics and the music were said to be open source now. That is, they no longer have copyright. That means anybody can do it. And as awful as my rendition would be, hurt your ears, steal some of your soul, perhaps, because I can't sing a lick. But if I sang and played an instrument and recorded Jingle Bells, even though that part is free and open source, my rendition could be protected by copyright on my end. I took something open source, I gave my rendition of it, I can protect my rendition. So the TI AMBI chip was a particular version of Jingle Bells, if you will, Jingle Bells being the D-Star protocol. Now, notice that this app and Martin, I know you got it to work on DMR, but I think that may be the difference. D-Star encoding is currently not acceptable, and so TX has been disabled. I'm thinking that really means for D-Star, because they would have to create their own code to implement the encoding of a message, but not the decoding of a message. Now, that's my take. If I'm wrong, I hope a more knowledgeable listener will email me or email the podcast and let us know. So I think it's intriguing. I think if you manage a room like Martin Rothwell, I think you probably do that. I do that here on Fusion. So if you're managing a room or whatever the right term is, reflector, et cetera, you might use this device on your phone just to keep tabs on what's going on without tying up a rig. So it might have some use for those who admin some of these things too. But it's interesting. I'm glad we're covering the story.
Just on that, because I did a talk myself on D-Star a few years ago. It's actually a company called DVSI that own the AMBI technology. I think Texas Instruments.
I guess TI just manufactures.
They manufacture it, yeah. But just looking at the website for DVSI now, they actually offer it on Android, iOS, Linux, Windows, as well as on physical chips. So I wonder if they actually are just licensing that software from those guys. I don't know.
That's
they
a
have
great
libraries and
point.
things available. Yeah.
Chris, that's a great point, because I think the rank and file ham doesn't know that if, in fact, our interpretation is correct. So that's a great bit to add here.
Certainly is. And Frank, I'm glad you chose Jingle Bells and not Happy Birthday, because I think Happy Birthday is copyrighted to Disney Corporation. So,
but my birthday's so close to Christmas, I will take Jingle Bells as a happy birthday for me.
Okay.
What was sorry, just slightly off topic. What was also interesting with D-Star is actually it's something that was put together by the Japanese Amateur Radio League. Like you say, it's not proprietary; it's a particular radio company. But they kind of took a bunch of off-the-shelf products. So the AMBI chip, well, that's a commercial product that's used in things like satellite phones and some of the commercial radio technology. They use some of the GSM technology again using mobile phones. Some of the modulation techniques used there. So I think they've just basically gone, I think when D-Star was put together, they sort of took a bunch of existing technologies and kind of put them together and made D-Star out of it, which was kind of quite interesting. So they did that's kind of the way that kind of worked.
They did that, Chris. And one little tidbit that's worth noting, remember Kenwood came out with an HT that did D-Star. My information is they have now discontinued that because of some part shortages coming out of China. There was a factory that burned down. So word on the street is that Kenwood has discontinued that. So that doesn't have anything to do with licensing. It's just got to do with the supply chain.
Interestingly, there was an early Kenwood radio that did D-Star, and there was the recent one, the last one we saw at Dayton, and I think at Friedrichshafen, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. That was the old singing, old dancing radio. So I'm not sure which of the two is been discontinued, but
the HT that was real popular.
Well, they were both HTs, but there was Kenwood did do one actually many years ago, which I think was probably discontinued a long time ago as well, because it seems like D-Star's gone through a bit of an evolution. So I know there's some new features that have come along. So certainly some of the newer ICOM radios now have some additional features that the kind of Generation 1 D-Star radio, shall we say, don't have.
Chris, were you there at the time? I'm sure we were talking to the guy from Flex when he was showing the remote head. I forget what they call it for their Maestro. And I'm sure he was saying, "Oh yeah, we're developing a D-Star plugin for these radios as well."
I think you're right. I think that was probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got D-Star and they've got Codec 2 plugins for the software driving Flex. You can run both from Flex.
Well, Chris's bit that he's added may be the answer. That may be what's happened.
Sorry, but with the Flex, it's actually a card with the chip on.
Oh, I see.
For the AMBI.
Fair enough.
But I suppose with software-defined technology, and the way that the industry is going now, it looks like pretty much every new radio coming out from the main manufacturers is based on, kind of computer technology. Then it actually would be, maybe it wouldn't be that difficult to do in software going forward. Rather than buying a physical chip, you could just implement it in code and just download it. It was a paid license fee, I guess.
If you say the owners of the AMBI code are now selling it as code for Android and Windows or whatever as well. So they've probably decided that as well, that they've said future is software.
Could be.
And
yeah.
they've probably squeezed all the life out of the hardware version that they could.
Yeah, and we're going more into software-defined radio. Bill, we've left you out in the cold. Have they left you anything to say?
No, not really. They covered it quite well. That's my guess as well with the app, that they're licensing the appropriate codec and software versus an actual hardware chip on a device. Likewise, I can't let it go. I'm sorry. I apologize, Frank. But it's not open source. It's public domain that thing was about.
Yeah, no, you're correct.
Usually,
I misspoke.
Yeah, it's okay, because a lot of the open source licenses specifically prohibit you from copywriting, derivative work or performance-based work. Not all of them, by the way. There's some very permissible open source licenses, but the vast majority I run into, you're generally not allowed to do that unless it's under special conditions. But yes, public domain works. Yeah, that's most disappointing, but that's how it works over here on this side of the pond.
Well, thanks for correcting, because I clearly misspoke on that. So thanks.
Right. Well, I think that's generated a lot of interest from us. It's there's some useful applications, and guys, let's see how it goes. It's a free download to your Android phone, so we can't complain too much. Us amateurs like the word free.
Definitely.
Yeah. Moving to our next news story. I covered this in our feature about 2 episodes back, where Roy Bailey put up his Morse key for auction, and on RSGB auction on eBay. Yeah, on eBay, trying to get my head around it. And he raised £1,025.99, which is a great deal. The RSGB then topped it up with another £1,000 and taking the total to over £2,000, which they donated to the charity, the NHS Charities. So what do you think, Ed?
Yeah, you obviously covered the background before, because I think you've covered it in the feature, but just in case people haven't heard that edition, the key in question, Roy Bailey actually built from scratch, designed and built himself, and it's the construction competition from the RSGB. I think it was back in October time or something. He won, so that was the winner, and rather than just going, didn't I do well, and off he went, he then turned around and organised this idea of selling it to raise money for the NHS combined charities. And, that was a really nice thing of him to do. And you can see all the pictures and everything on the RSGB website and everything of this key. Beautifully made piece of work. I don't do CW. I'd be tempted to buy this, but not at $1,000, £1,000, whatever it was. But really, really nicely made, a work of art. And he's obviously put his heart into making it. And then he's said, okay, look, the people at the NHS, they need our support. NHS, National Health Service, for those who don't know. And he's raised all this money, and the RSGB has matched the amount he raised, and that's just absolutely fantastic. This guy's a good one.
Yeah, I did say to him, Ed, if you make another one, Roy, you have to keep it, because it did look really good. Bill, we left you out in the cold last time. Let's bring you in early, so you've got an option here.
Oh, thank you. Not a problem. I did like the story a lot, and I do remember when you had the feature on the Get on the Air for Christmas. Was that it, or was it Get on the Air to Care for Christmas? I can't remember now. But the fact that he was able to auction this handmade key off and get over £2,000 to the NHS Charities is just another wonderful story about people in our hobby that are adding and doing things for the community And I just love reading stuff like this.
I agree with you, Bill. It was a nice feel-good story when we did that feature. Frank, your thoughts on this one?
I'm totally in agreement. I was very happy to read this story and to look through it. I remember when we covered it, I think this team may have been the one that covered it, some time ago, but it's delighted. Just another bit of good community spirit and great contribution by another amateur radio operator.
Yeah. And I think the other thing was Roy approached the RSGB and spoke to Heather, the communications manager, and Heather certainly helped him get this promoted. He didn't know quite how to do it, and it was nice because the RSGB got involved and Heather helped him through it. So, it's the RSGB, if you remember, are there to help you, same as the ARRL, I'm sure. Martin, any thoughts?
The cheeky side of me says, this is a little over £2,000. That'd be nice, a nice top up to the £350 million a week they promised from the side of that bus. But that was just a cheeky side of me. We know that didn't happen. But I looked at this, I thought, seriously, who spends that kind of money on a Morse key? That is effectively an on-off switch. And then I thought £300 was a lot of money. But then I realised what I spent on the microphone that I'm using right now. And then I thought, actually, do you know what? I guess if you're into Morse, then this is obviously a good investment. And the NHS Charities is an amazing cause, especially given current, global, current global situation with COVID and stuff. It's a great cause. So, yeah, fair play to him for putting it up for auction. And, well done as well to the RSGB for topping that up. Win-win all round, I think.
Yeah, well, the key was actually a bug key. So it was a manual bug key. So you had to sort of build it was very, very mechanical. And
I was looking at the picture of it. I'm looking at the picture of it now. It's called the Virus Perplexed Bug, clearly based on the Vibroplex. The Virus Perplexed Bug CW key. So, this is a handmade piece of equipment. It's as the guys have been saying, it's very, very well, engineered, crafted piece of kit. It's going to last forever. I would imagine it's phenomenal work. So actually, it may have been £1,000 for somebody, but actually, they've got something there that's unique. He may make one more for himself, maybe, but this is not something you can go and buy off, from a dealer. This is something that's going to last for a long time, and well done to G0 VFS for making it and raising all that money for the NHS, and good, good on the RSGB for adding to the pot as well and boosting the funds there. So a good news story.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris, and I did like the title Virusplex as because of the COVID virus. So yeah, it's a good one. It's nice to follow up on a news story that we covered a few weeks back, because at the time I was recording the interview with the RSGB guys and Roy. The auction hadn't finished, and for some reason I was running late. That was the week I wrecked my car. Yeah, so I was running late doing the interview, and I think the auction was actually happening almost while we were recording. So there you go. Right, move to the next news story. ARRL Life member Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, is the 2021 Carole Perry Educator of the Year. Good on you, Neil. Frank, is this your story?
I don't know that I submitted it, but I completely and wholeheartedly endorse it. And Neil has another podcast, a very active podcast. He has a lot of interesting stuff, except for the time he had me on there. I guess that was a dud, but he is just one of the good folks in amateur radio. He's a high school chemistry teacher, but he's had an experiment on the International Space Station. Now, that's something pretty significant. Not every high school teacher is able to do that. So I'll pass it on to whoever you want to go next. But I'm just delighted that this was just announced.
Yeah, well, those of us who went to Dayton a couple of years ago met Neil. And not, as you say, really nice guy. on that one. Ed, over to you on this one. He's a fellow presenter with you on Amateur Radio Newsline, isn't he?
Yeah. Neil's program's called Ham Talk Live, and it's actually, I think, the only amateur radio podcast where you can actually call in and talk to the guests and to the host. And it makes it rather a stressful program in some ways, but Neil controls it very well and it all works very well. As for amateur radio and Neil, at one time he was the youngest ever licensed amateur, I think in the world, but certainly in the US. He got his license when he was 5 years old. So amateur radio has been a part of his life all of that time. Just to give the full information, by the way, of the Carole Perry Educator of the Year Award, it's actually run by and sponsored by the Orlando Hamvention group, who unfortunately have cancelled this year for 2021. But the awards are going ahead. And this was actually announced when Neil was doing a programme about the Hamvention and what they're going to do virtually instead of the actual event. And then they said, well, there's something else as well. We can announce the award. And so, it wasn't a surprise to him. He already knew, I believe. But for all the listeners, it was quite a surprise. But a very well-earned award. He is a school teacher, so he's involved with children all the time. He's also one of the prime movers behind the Youth on the Air for Region 2, the Americas. And he actually was one of the main organisers of the camp at Voice of America that was planned to happen in 2020, is hoped to happen in 2021 now. So he is involved with all of this all of the time, and he enjoys what he does, and he's a really nice guy. We all met him when we were actually at Dayton in 2019, because we all went together to the Voice of America Museum, and that was all organised for us by Neil. So thanks, Neil, and congratulations again, mate.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. Martin, unfortunately, you didn't come to Dayton with us. You haven't met Neil, but would you like to say a few words?
I don't have very much to say other than congratulations. It's great achievement.
Yeah, he's a very, very educated guy, as I say, and very, very good guy. We met him in the States. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well done to Neil. Like I say, we met him over in Dayton. I think he arranged for us to go to the VOA Museum and the transmitter site there, which was great. So he's a guy that gets things done, I think, in what I'm seeing. He's been involved in lots and lots of things, so I think it's very much deserved. It's a great video. If you go onto his QRZ page, Neil's call sign is WB9VPG, and he's got a few links on there from his younger days when he was, as I was saying, he was a very young child when he got his license, and there's some videos on there from those days. One with a cat, which seems to not enjoy it very much. So I'll let you find that and click on the link there and watch that for yourself.
You know, Mr. Rothwell's going to be devastated if he's doing anything nasty to a cat.
No, it's not. I don't think it's deliberate, but anyway, it's all in fun.
All right. Last words on this one, Bill?
Yeah, just congratulations, Neil. You earned it. I also remember Neil won the ARRL Professional Educator of the Year Award. I think it was 2004. So he's been at this a long time, and he's definitely continuing to introduce the next generation of students to amateur radio, and I'm deeply grateful for him. Also, just a random story since we're picking on Neil. He's the youngest person to join the Quarter Century Wireless Association because he was, I guess he would have been 30. So I always thought that was interesting as well. But once again, congratulations, Neil. Well earned.
Yeah, from the ICQ podcast, Neil, we're all pleased for you. Congratulations, and keep up the good work. Moving to another news story. AMSAT are talking about a new satellite launch. The Vanderbilt Rad FX Sat 2 Fox E1, 1E rather, is set to launch. This is one of yours, isn't it, Ed?
No, it's not one of mine, but I think this is, I'll just throw a few comments in and then we can get it to the actual experts. I believe this is the last of the series of Fox satellites before AMSAT go on to Golf, which is the higher orbit ones with the larger range. But this one's also got, I believe, a linear transponder. So this is really the pick of the bunch from all the Fox satellites. This is Fox 1E. And great that you're getting it launched, because I think it was planned to be launched sometime late last year, but launches often get delayed for all kinds of different reasons. So it'll be great to have another satellite up there for those that like chasing satellites.
Certainly will. And I don't suppose they could say that COVID delayed the launch. That doesn't seem ring true somehow. Anyway, Bill, this must have been your story then you put up. But you do a lot of satellites anyway, don't you?
Not as much as Ruth. You know how it always seems to be that we get the stories for Ed on the week that the other team's in, and then we get the satellite stories the week that Ruth's not on.
Yeah, but we do that deliberately, just for giggles.
I know it is a giggle, but this is a inverting linear transponder on this CubeSat, and is it 2 meters up, 70 sems down. There's details out on the AMSAT website on the band pass for the transponder. After it's supposed to get launched here hopefully it gets launched by the time the podcast comes out. But if it doesn't, it will be soon. And then after it's up and it goes through the shakedown tour and is turned over to general use, we will have to pester Ruth to see how it goes, because I have stuff for FM easy sats, but I don't actually have the stuff you need to do the linear sats yet. So it'd be very interesting to see how this one goes.
Certainly will. And I wished I'd still got my FT847. I think that might have done it because that had a satellite mode on that box, but I wasn't in the satellites at the time when I let it go, unfortunately. But there you go. And well, if we had everybody on, all 12 of us, I think the podcast will already go about 2 hours. You imagine it would go about 3.5 hours. And I know there are people out there keep saying, well, can you do longer? But there must also be people saying, God, this is a bit long. So I don't know what the answer is, but there. Right. Chris, what's your thoughts?
I think it's been said really. It's another CubeSat. It looks interesting. I'm sure the guys will work it that do that sort of thing. I still haven't, even though I did say I was going to do it, I still haven't managed to actually get on satellites, I'm afraid. But the more up there, the more likely I guess I am to do it. So, but yes, it looks very interesting, and it looks like it's going up pretty soon. So good luck, and hopefully everything goes well.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a good one. Martin, I know you've done a few satellites, but this one's not an FM bird as such. It's got a linear transponder on it, so it's going to be a bit more difficult, I'd suggest.
It'll be a bit difficult. I mean, I've got an Icom IC910X, which has satellite modes in it. Will do satellite quite happily. Of course, that is my home-based radio. I don't really want to take it out. In order to use that with a satellite, I'd have to have some kind of antenna in the garden. I can't really point my aero antenna out the window as easily. But hey, maybe sometime. New satellite, yay! Sounds like fun. Just as I started getting into satellites, as you know, I was really enjoying it. I had a daughter, and so I don't have as much time to play with my own toys now. So this is going to be one further down the list from me. But as I say, I really enjoyed playing with satellites when I started doing it, especially because I was a new call sign for everyone. And so all the people on the satellites, because obviously there's a smaller group of people, I guess, using sats, they were quite excited to have someone different to talk to. And so when I put my call sign out, loads of people came back to me, which I was quite excited about and had a real buzz. But yeah, one day I'll probably work out how to get an antenna up outside for satellites, and we go from there.
Yeah, I understand, Martin, and I'd like to do more of it as well. Do a little bit every now and again, but not much. Frank, last words on this new satellite?
Yeah, I actually put the story in, and I was very intrigued by it. It's one of 10 satellites in the overall payload, and with my penchant for cheeky humor, those who get this will finally have the definitive answer on what did the fox say. Bill Barnes, I'm sure you caught that reference, that song that was popular. What did the fox say a few years ago?
If you ever heard the beacon on the Fox satellite, you'll understand the answer. Her name is Veronica.
Okay. But this will be interesting as somebody who's interested in satellites and who hopes to work one or two in the near future. I think this is a great one. And the technology's newer and, all that stuff. There's also a telemetry link that might be intriguing for those of us who like data modes as well. So interesting story, interesting launch. Virgin Orbit, very near their Launcher One is kind of a new thing for them, I think. So we'll see how it goes. Hope it launches Sunday, which is the projected date for this episode to drop. So
yeah, let's hope it does release on Sunday, and there'll be another one up there.
Just one last thing there, because Frank reminded me of something. On the AMSAT website, there is a Fox telemetry download. It works on multiple platforms, and that's how you decode that telemetry from the Fox CubeSats. Super.
Yeah, that's good, Bill. That's good. Right, let's move to our last news story. Ed, you posted it in the file here, but I think we all saw the email and we all shed a tear this week. The big news is...
unfortunately, Hamvention is not going to happen in person in 2021. They've made the call early from the organisers from Dara to give everybody not have anybody book accommodation or travel or anything. They don't feel that it's going to be at a stage during the year where there's going to be enough of the COVID problem solved. So no doubt they'll be setting up some kind of online and QSO party as they did in 2020. The story there is the big news is no Hamvention at Xenia in 2021. See you in 2022.
Yeah, well, maybe if the vaccines work, let's hope 2022 continues to happen. Frank, it's your side of the pond. I assume you were probably going to go, even though us in Europe were less likely to go this year. But it's disappointment for you as well, I expect.
Well, it's disappointing, but honestly, it's more of a disappointment because you guys can't come over again. That was a terrific experience. But the year that we went was my first time to actually go to Hamvention. Been to a lot of other Hamfests, but first time to go to Hamvention. So I think they're making the right choice for just a lot of reasons. And it would have been pretty bad to try to have it and have a lot of super spreader events and things like that going. So disappointing, but it's just part of what we're going through.
Yeah. And you and I won't be wandering around this year, as Colin put it, the terrible twins.
Yeah. We'll save on diapers.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Just echoing the same thing as everyone. Disappointing that they're canceling, but definitely I think they made a good choice based on the conditions they have to work with and the timeline to pull off an event so large. This is, based on how I know how large events go, this is pretty much towards the go no go last date, and because they have to get contracts in place for certain stuff, and I'm sure they already had the facility contract together, but they need contracts for all the other ancillary things you need to pull off an event this large. So I'm glad they didn't have things hanging out there and people making reservations and stuff, but at the same time I am a little sad it's gone. However, the bright and shiny light at this is maybe we'll have another virtual contest university, which I really enjoyed in 2020. That was one of the highlights of the year for me, actually, was sitting through the contest university online. I really enjoyed that.
Well, that's good. Martin, I know you didn't go last year and you weren't coming this year, but your daughter will be about 18 months old and walking and plaguing the life out of Emma by the next year. You might be able to come.
Maybe it's not so much just my daughter. It's cost as well and everything like that. It's got a lot of money to get over to the States and spend hotel and everything else like that. And obviously, I have other priorities. I have a young daughter at the moment. One day I'll get out there. It's sad they've been cancelled, but I'll be honest with you, this won't be the first big event that's cancelled this year. It certainly won't be the last. I think they've made the right decision. I think we just need to do without these events. For the time being, we need to beat this virus. And then when we beat the virus and everything's under control, then is the time to start thinking about getting out there, organising events and things, but not until everyone is vaccinated. So I think they've done the right thing.
I think you're right. They've grown up and become the responsible adult, as I was saying a lot last year, that people have to become the responsible adult.
Responsible adult. Hold on 1 second. No, not getting any match on that. Sorry.
All right. Well, I still think you have to have a responsible adult, and it's not me after I've had 3 coffees, I'm afraid. Chris, round to you for last words on this one.
Well, I totally agree. I think there's a lot of preparation goes into these events. I think it's in May normally, so that's not very far away from now. I think based on that, I think last year they sort of hung on a bit, hoping that it might have been able to happen, and they had to cancel it. And this year, I think they've realised that actually, they can save a lot of time and stress having to undo things, and people having to cancel flights and get refunds and accommodation, and obviously not just people visiting, but all the various vendors that go there, and it's lots of it. There's a huge amount of not just the core team at Dara, but also all the people there going to be exhibiting need to put into this. So, I think they made the right call. It's harder than likely to have been able to happen anyway. So make the call early so that people don't put in all that effort. And next year will be bigger and better once we're through this.
Yeah, I understand, Chris. And in fairness, my prediction, probably wrong, is I don't see any of the big events happening this year. Maybe the National Hamfest in the UK, because that's the back end of September. But
yeah, hopefully, if this, certainly here in the UK, I don't know about other parts of the world, certainly here in the UK, the government are spending an awful lot of resources and effort and time to get this vaccine out there, and hopefully that will go really well. And hopefully once that starts to take effect, we'll really start to see the rate of infection rapidly drop, and maybe that's when things can start to go to normal. But I don't think anyone is holding their breath. I think we all want to see this done properly, and hopefully things will start to improve rapidly once that starts to kick in.
Yeah, I agree. Right, that's the end of the news story. That's the end of the news stories. Let's find out what the guys have been up to in the last year. Let's work along my sheet here. I'm going to start with Chris, because then I can cross half the things off on my sheet, because Chris and I do various things I've been talking about.
Yeah, not in the last year, in the last few weeks. So I've been playing around a little bit with DMR. I think I've mentioned in the last episode, I've got a new DMR and a new Fusion handheld. I think actually, Martin, you and I have both been spending money on similar things very recently. So the new DMR radio, the Anytone 878, is massively better than the previous radio that I had, in terms of this actually lets you tinker with what's going on. You can see what's going on. You can make you can make changes on the fly. You don't have to refer to software all the time, and it makes it. I've now got a much better idea what's going on. So I'm starting to finally get my head around DMR. I've also got a Fusion handheld as well, and I'm using them both through my little hotspots. So yeah, that's kind of pretty much all I've been doing. I've had a little listen around HF, not a huge amount of operating, I'm afraid. And even though we all problem I find this time of year, because the days are so short, when I finish work, it's dark. And when it's dark, my aerial doesn't work particularly well on the lower bands. And of course, it's only really the lower bands that work better once the sun goes out of the way. So, places like 20 meters is out of, doesn't work after the sun goes down. So, unfortunately, it's only really weekends that I've got time to be able to operate HF at the moment, and haven't got a lot of time then either, I'm afraid. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not using a huge amount of radio right now.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. But I know you and I have been fairly busy on VHF and UHF. Martin, what have you been up to?
All the D-Star haters are going to be out in their elements on the comments this week. Mostly D-Star, actually. A little bit of Fusion. Nearly no analog, with the exception, I think, of talking to you on XP maybe once or twice. I finally got my hotspot and PyStar working and talking to each other, with massive thanks to a couple of people on the PyStar forums who, although they said, this is what your problem is, they were unable to fix it because we didn't realise there was actually a bug in my load that meant the GUI doesn't talk to the back end of PyStar. But it's when they pointed me to that, and then they said, hey, check out the Repeater Builder forums. I went to there. The Repeater Builder forums are like, oh, yeah, you can do all this manually. Just go into here and change the advanced settings, change the 1 to a 0. That should sort it. And, of course, I went back. It wasn't that, but then I scrolled up. Oh, it might be this. And I started settings. And it all sprung into life. What was happening before when I was keying up, the radio would hear me and it would immediately key over me effectively. Effectively, my hotspot thought it was a repeater. So it was telling the radio to go into transmit. Hence, I was getting more and more frustrated, but it's all working now. And I've had a fair amount of fun making that work. And now that it works, man, am I having a lot of fun with this. It's amazing actually as well how much D-Star has taken off since lockdown, COVID. I guess more people are finding their toys they've had before. There's quite a lot of new people coming onto D-Star as well. In fact, a few people that often pop up on XP on Fusion have also gone down the D-Star line as well. So I'm hearing quite a few similar call signs appearing on 1C. Other than that, yeah, just generally having fun. A little bit of HF, tuning through 20 meters the other day. Had a contact with a guy in Austria, I think it was, just briefly, but then had to join a conference call. So had to switch away. But yeah, other than that, just having fun with digital voice, really.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds good. Ed, what have you been up to? I assume you're still in fairly a lockdown and you can't get on hilltops.
Well, actually, no, the lockdown's no longer the problem. It was, but now the problem is winter's arrived. Yesterday, for example, it was -7 to -8 was the warmest temperatures we had. Today, it's warm, it's -2. Ice everywhere, snow everywhere. We had some fresh snow last night. So basically, travelling on these roads at the moment is not a good idea. We are allowed to travel, especially from where I am. We're in a very lucky situation that we're in one of the lesser infected areas with COVID. Some areas that are really bad, they're only allowed to travel 15 kilometres. We don't have that restriction around here. The areas I'd be going into are also ones that are not as badly affected as others. So yeah, I'd love to get out and do a sort of activation or two, because it's a new year, which means that all the counters get reset, so that I get points now for every sort of summit that I activate from. You're only allowed to get points once a year, you see. And on top of that, there's winter bonus points until the end of March. So, yeah, I'd love to be out activating SOTA at the moment, but it's the weather that's against me at the moment rather than anything else. So I've been doing some electronics repairs and computer repairs and various bits and pieces at home. My bag is sat in the corner that I can grab and go at any time to do a SOTA activation if the weather gets better. Apart from that, just been working the HF bands, but they haven't been too interesting the last week either. But early morning grey line is still working, and occasionally I get some NVIS contacts to people who have managed to get onto the summits around here. But generally, everything indoors at the moment.
Well, I don't blame you if it's that cold, Ed. Don't blame me at all. Right. Frank, what have you been up to?
Been trying to stay out of trouble by staying busy, and some of it's been sort of on the research on amateur radio, and some of it's station building. I've started a new study of generational change in the ARL sweepstakes contest participants. They do one for CW and one for sideband, and this will cover 2000 to 2020 contests. I'm working with Dr. Scott Wright, K0MD, He just rotated out as the editor of the National Contesting Journal, and working with ARL's radio sport manager, Bart Janke, for data access. And they've been forthcoming with that. So we've got a template for that study and have that underway. I have a two-part series in the National Contesting Journal, in which part one on studying price, performance, and satisfaction HF rigs is in the current issue. And I'll be giving a talk to the Denby Dale Club in England on Wednesday, January 20th, involving the entire study. Their website is at www.ddars.net. We'll have the times, and they usually put that on the YouTube channel the next day. So should be there. Working with Ed, Bill, and the rest of the steering committee, planning the 2021 Portable Operations Challenge. It'll be on a new date this year, but it'll still be in the fall season. And we got a shout out on another podcast here recently, and there seems to be some reverberations from our modest start this past year of people that didn't see it in time but are very interested. And so foxmikehotel.com/challenge is where people need to go. Well, fortunately, Santa Claus made a return trip to Ridgeland, and he left an ICOM IC9700 on my doorstep. And one of the elves at DX Engineering helped him with that. I haven't unpacked it yet. Got to get some antennas up, and I've got three. It covers 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and 1.2 gigahertz. And I've got three antennas in my loft. One already installed. It's a set of 2 meter stacked loops with a phasing harness, and I'm waiting for the manufacturer to actually make a similar stacked set of loops for 70 centimeters. I think I'm going to go with a small Yagi for 1.2 gigahertz. It'll be mounted on a small antenna rotor. And at the same time, although it won't be used with the IC9700, I'm adding a set of stacked loops for 6 meters, all in the same attic space. So, Martin, I'm getting very, very familiar with my roof joist line, and I've been doing some serious rafter dancing up there. So I haven't hurt myself yet. So another little bit of station building at the encouragement of Pete Giuliano, N6QW. I have a Hermes Light 2 SDR that should be delivered by the time this episode drops, although you can never tell about DHL as a courier. The cool thing about this relatively low-cost SDR is it'll run many slices of receivers, like up to 14 or something. If you use the Spark SDR software. Now, I don't really plan to use it as a transceiver, at least right now. I plan to use it for a whisper receiver on a lot of different bands to feed the WhisperNet database from here in Ridgeland. We really don't have any receivers in the entire state that feed Whisper. And so I've had a Whisper beacon from QRP Labs, and Hans Sommer's little device, the Ultimate 3, just does a great job. And I've been using that to test the dipole antennas that I recently installed in my attic. So I've been doing a little bit of those things, been dealing with a little bit of cold weather. We actually had a little bit of snow here this week. So trying to stay busy and out of trouble, sir.
Well, it sounds like you have been busy, and sounds like you have stayed out of trouble, Frank. So result. Bill, what have you been up to?
Quite a bit. You'll have to let me know how you make out with that Hermes Light too. I'm looking at mine right here.
Oh, great.
I've had one for, I think mine's a version 5 or version 6. It's been a while, but I haven't done much with it other than FT8. But anyway, I was able to do the ARRL RIDI Roundup contest a few weekends ago. I was able to work 164 stations. During that contest, I finally cooked my Balun on the Windham by pushing the power and duty cycle a little too high during the contest. I should know better by now. This is the first one I've burned up since about 2005, 2006. So it's been a while. So I've been relatively lucky. I did get some advice on building another Balun instead of buying one, so I can make it a little beefier. Use a little bit heavier wire, gauge wire, and a little bit bigger bigger toroid, not magnet, toroid core. Get something a little bit bigger and weather seal that a little bit different. Otherwise, I mean, I've been SOTA chasing. I did a bunch of FT8 contacts. On the SOTA, I will share this with, because I think Ed will find it interesting. Mark, NK8Q, on Sunday decided, hey, we're allowed to go out now. I'm going to do 3 SOTA summits in one day. And I actually worked him on all 3. So he was a busy boy from, I'm the first one about 1400 UTC, and the last one was about 2000 UTC, just as it was starting to get dark. So he was out all day long hiking. So he had a good day. And then the last thing I want to share is last night I'm on Facebook, and one of the guys that run the remote ham radio was live streaming. So I watched his video for a few minutes, and he says, I'm going to remote into the Croatia station. I'm going to use my Croatian call. So I actually worked. This is, you know, you talk about not real radio and all this other stuff. I worked 9 Alpha 5 USA remotely while I was watching him with the audio muted, working me across the internet from the station from Croatia. He was running like a kilowatt into a 40-meter tri-band or a 40-meter beam or something, and it was like, hey, he actually picked me up. So that was amusing, just from the sheer, hey, I worked somebody in New York State who was using a station in Croatia and has a Croatian call sign. So that was amusing. So I thought I'd share that with the listeners because it did give me a chuckle. And that's about it. But been very busy the last month for sure. I've been on the radio quite a bit.
Yeah, certainly sounds like it, Bill. Certainly sounds like it. Well, I worked Croatia just before Christmas on 20 meters QRP from the south of England. Nowhere near as good a feat as you. But the guy nearly fell off his seat when I told him I was running 10 watts. What have I been up to? Well, I think I mentioned on the last episode that I had a Yaesu FT70D for Christmas. And I proved it was a dead-on arrival. The radio worked, the USB interface didn't, and it's quite a horrible set of things you have to go through to get it into programming mode. But this one just wouldn't go into programming mode. You know, 3 computers, 3 operating systems, and 2 program leads, and lots of other factory resets and all that stuff. Couldn't get it to go. Just didn't want to know. So I phoned a dealer on the 4th of January. A replacement arrived on the 5th. I put the dud radio back in the post on the 6th, and I assume they got it back the next day. So, yeah, unfortunately, there is the odd DOA. Now, in fairness, this is a radio Mrs. B bought. I didn't choose who she bought it from, but I will say Moonraker did give her come up with the goods. Now, maybe because I know Chris, but I think he would have done that for anybody else, in fairness. I had done everything I could, and I think he realised that, so it was swapped out. And I'm now the proud owner of a very, very nice Yaesu FT70D, which is the lower end of the market on Fusion for a Handy Talkie, but they do not work well. So good on that. Have had lots of calls on Fusion. At the weekend, I was on Fusion via the hotspot on CQ UK, not clogging up the repeater, which was only half a mile up the road from me. I thought I'd use the hotspot. And I managed to catch a couple of guys that I haven't spoken to in absolutely ages. Ian on the Isle of Man, and long-time listener to the podcast, Phil Higginbottom, VK. Sorry, Phil, I can't fully remember your call sign on the top of my head, but please forgive me. But Phil and I had a long chat. Met Phil when he was over in the UK, so it was good to have a chat with him. So that went well. Other things I've been doing, well, I've been playing my Anytone 878 I bought it with a Bluetooth option. Chris decided he didn't want that option. I decided I did. So I've got it now set up on the Works fan that the audio goes through the audio system on the Works fan, and I can Velcro a PTT switch to the steering wheel so I can use it when I'm at work. Hi. Another interesting Christmas present I got was an insulation tester. Now, this isn't built anywhere near as good as the Mega meters I've got. The Megas are, expensive, top of the range type stuff. This is quite a cheap one. But the argument was that with a Mega, if the electronic ones give you 500 volts, put 500 volts across the device, this one gives me 3 voltage settings, 250, 500 and 1000 volts. And I got that for Christmas. I was quite pleased with that because it allows me to test transistors. Sorry, no. That was the joke years ago when I told somebody I couldn't work out why my BC 107s were always short circuit when I test them with a Mega. No, I was able to test capacitors and I'm really pleased with that. I've just finished reading a book on Bletchley Park. Not radio related as such, but it does talk about radio traffic and what was going on. Very interesting book. It's not about Alan Turing. He gets mentioned, but only in passing. This is all about the setting up, how it went on, what went on, the secrecy, and it's like quotes from people who worked there. And it's interesting, but it's a hard read. It doesn't flow and it jumps around a bit, and you have to really have your wits about you. But I finished it and it was quite good. One last thing is on Saturday, and I said I was on CQ UK most of Saturday, I spoke to ZL4AX, and he tells me that down in New Zealand, they've had loads of problems with the FT70D, and they were saying they found a fix for it, a little fix, which I thought, okay, well, tell me what it is. And he said, well, the problem is the Yaesu have put the battery save mode on as default. So because it's on as default, the receiver switches off every 2 seconds. It's on 2 seconds, off 2 seconds, on, off. And if you push the Wires X button to connect to a Wires X server, chances are you push the button, there's a fair chance that the radio will go to sleep before you get the information back from the Wires X connection. So he said, what do you have to do? He said, go in and turn the battery saver off. Obviously, it reduces your battery time, but you always get your connection. So I told Chris, as I say, Chris and I have been communicating quite regularly on this. But I think Paul gave us all, that's Paul, ZL4AX, gave us a great piece of information that they found out there down there in New Zealand. So hopefully they're passing that on to you guys is useful. For those who've got an FT70D, it's menu option 48 RF saver, I think they call it, but it's battery save. So that's what I've been up to, guys.
Just a quick one. Phil Heckingbottom's call sign is VK6 ADF.
I knew it was ADF. I had 3 in the back of my mind, but I didn't want to mention it wrong. So yeah, sorry, Phil. As I say, great to chat to you the other day. So with that in mind, it comes to the end of another News Roundtable. I'd like to thank you all for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Martin. Another good one.
I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Been fun. See you next time.
Will do. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Enjoyable as always.
Hopefully. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Kell, K4FMH.
Hey, Martin, thank you for having me, and let me know about playing curly with Leslie and me on the new Three Stooges, okay?
All right, I'll be curly. I'd like to thank Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Thanks, Bill.
Yes, thank you for having me on. Thanks, everybody. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I'll say 73 to you all, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Well, now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. As my colleagues just mentioned there in the news roundtable, unfortunately we've now lost Data and Hamvention from our calendar for 2021. So on the positive side of things, we've got news that the QSO Today Show host, Eric 4Z1 Uniform Golf, has announced the next QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. It will be taking place on the weekend of the 13th and 14th of March. Over this 48-hour period, you can, join many hands from around the world as they take place in a very packed speakers schedule, along with a virtual kit building workshop, exhibition halls where all your favourite dealers and manufacturers will be there. And as I say, there's lots of additional services as well. They've already got 60 plus speakers lined up to address the conference, and they're also as well got people as well like the ARRL, platinum sponsors like Flex Radio, and also gold sponsors like Ellicraft, R-Finder and CSI. So as I say, with our exhibitions potentially being lost in person, this is a great way of keeping in touch with your friends in the hobby in the virtual world. As I say, early bird ticket prices just $10 for the weekend event, and probably what makes this a good value is that not only does it give you the 2 days at the show, but also 30 days on demand to all the recordings and videos, etc. So you can pop back over a period of time of a month, just to engage with things you might have missed or might have jogged your memory, and sort of go from there. So a great opportunity there to get involved. As I say, we're going to pop a link on the ICQ podcast webpage, where you can go along and get yourself signed up for this event that's happening in a couple of months' time. Right, next weekend is the winter 2021 AM QSO Party. It's going to take place at 1800 UTC on Friday the 22nd until 17:59 UTC on Sunday the 24th of January. And it's going to be taking place in the operating windows on 160, 80, 40, 20, 15 and 10 metres. And as I say, the event is obviously not only open to amateurs throughout Europe, but it's also open to everyone around the world as well. So it's a fun non-contest event, and it's organised by the AM Amateur Radio Europe Facebook group, and is available for all categories of licensee to take place apart. So a great opportunity there, I say, to get on the bands next weekend and take part in the winter AM QSO Party. Now, you might be interested to know why there's different call signs popping up in the UK that might have been out of sync for what you would have thought to. We had a question in our last episode in relation to G call signs being assigned to full licensees. Well, if you're about to pass your amateur radio license or about to upgrade, you might have an interest in what license may be available that you might be able to get yourself something a little bit more customized. So a freedom information request has been submitted, and a current up-to-date database of all of the signed and allocated reserved call signs for the UK have been published. So interestingly, there are nearly 147,000 call signs which are either allocated or reserved in the UK. So as I'm sure a lot of people are interested to know that very strong number there. So we've got a link to the Excel spreadsheet on the ICQ podcast webpage. So check that out if you're interested in trying to find an available call sign for you if you're about to upgrade or looking to snag a certain call sign in the future. So certainly it could be interesting fun there. Right, we're going to head over to our features episode, which is our feature on improving your Handy Talkie. As always, guys, really hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I wanted to talk about improving your HT. UK we call them walkie-talkies, in the States they're called handy talkies. However, they're both the same thing. Now, some of this will be very useful for beginners. Some of it may also make you get those HTs out the drawer that have been sitting in there and you've not used them for a while, because hopefully I'm going to give you some suggestions of what to do with them and how you can improve them. And also, if you're fairly useful for handy talkies or use them a lot, then hopefully I might just stimulate some thought. Either way, I don't have all the answers, but in some ways I'm looking for you to send me feedback, and any feedback will be gratefully received and we can add it into a future program. Right, so here we are, we've bought our handy talkie. Well, I think the first thing we're going to have to start to talk about is operating skills. And, operating skills are important no matter what you do. However, guys, please listen before you call. So obvious, but please listen before you call. Now, I'm going to add to that. Don't just listen, because I don't know what type of handy talkie you guys are going to have. Look at the S meter or the signal strength meter. See if there's anybody transmitting, because you might not be able to hear them. If you've got CTCSS or DCS set on your radio and it's a different tone, you will not be able to hear the other person, but they're still transmitting on that frequency. Equally, you might be on a repeater that's got a dual mode, and it may be either in analog or digital, and at the point you're trying to call, there may be a conversation going on digital. So I know that a lot of people that use digital radios and analog radios are getting frustrated with each other because people are not looking to see if there is another transmission going on that potentially you may or may not be able to hear. One of the things I was taught a long time ago is we have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth. Listen and look twice as much as we talk, and that certainly works out before you actually start calling out on a handy talkie. Now, to improve things, don't whisper into the microphone. I know it's when you first get a handy talkie or you first get on the air, you're mic shy. Don't whisper, because that's the worst thing you can do if somebody's working in a noisy environment or they're mobile. If a mobile is trying to get back to you and you're whispering, it's very hard for them to hear what you're saying. Certainly while they're driving. So be positive, and if your radio is lucky enough to have a microphone gain, set the microphone gain up so it's optimized for you. Exactly as the same as we would do with SSB. You've got to understand local customs. Now, local customs are things that happen in an area. As you go into that area and you think you're wrong or they're wrong, and because they're doing something you're not sure of. Now, let's be honest. In the UK, the 2 meter calling frequency is 145.500 megahertz. So 145.500. Now, from experience of working in Cyprus, I can call all day on that. And the locals tend to use 145.525 as their general get-together chat channel. So you've got to try and find out. If you go somewhere that you don't normally go, be prepared to find that there may be anomalies that people have agreed in a local area. Another one is 4 meter band. In the UK, the 4 meter calling frequency, it's deemed as the calling frequency, is 70.450 megahertz. Now, if you go down to Worthing on the south coast, 70.450 they use as a chat channel. They don't use it as a calling channel. And the reason they tell me is that they want people to come up on what they think is the calling frequency so they find some activity. And yes, you can call, and yes, you could move off to another frequency. But be prepared, say in the Worthing area, that they'll keep you on 70.450 because that's where they all chat. So just be aware, there are some differences, and I'm sure, and I haven't got the band plan in front of me, but I'm sure that the States you would have similar anomalies. You'd have your set frequencies for calling, which most people would agree, but you may find areas that change. Now, the other thing is, try and work out the best days and the best time for your contacts, because, people work during the week. Weekends might be better. Outside of the main working hours would probably be better. But have a good listen round for a while before you decide when's the best time, because it's no good calling CQ if everybody's at work and nobody's at home on those particular frequencies at the particular time you're calling. So try and work out when's the best time, and that's done by a certain amount of listening. Moving down, we all know height and it is king, and it certainly is. If you can gain some height somewhere, on top of a car park or on a hilltop, you will go much, much further. Proof of the pudding is, in the UK, we have the PMR 446 frequencies, which are probably the equivalent of the family radio service in the States. They're license free, and they're supposed to be crippled that they have a range of about 5 kilometres, around about 5 kilometres. Trust me, if you're on a hilltop or you're up high, they still go a lot further. They might have a crippled antenna. They may be limited to half a watt, but you'd be surprised how far UHF really will go if you're out in the clear high up. And the last thing is power levels. Make sure you got your radio set to the power level required. We're supposed to operate on the lowest power needed to make the contact. But that's more important on Handy Talkies, because if your Handy Talkie is running too high a power, you'll find that you'll drain the battery much, much quicker. So, just think about that one. Moving on to antennas for a Handy Talkie. Well, there's possibility that you can get a better antenna than the stock antenna that came with the particular Handy Talkie. Now, some of them have good gain and are useful, but make sure you get a good one and you don't get a knockoff pretend one. Often, Handy Talkie antennas are not that good, so just be aware of it. And as I say, make sure if you buy a aftermarket antenna, it certainly fits your radio. And if it's SMA, make sure it screws all the way down and there isn't anything stopping it making the full connection. Okay, another thing is, and I know it can be done, certainly there's no reason why you can't use a small Yagi or an HB9 antenna, a small beam. If you're out and about walking, alright, vertically polarize it, and you should be able to increase your distance, purely because you've got a better antenna on. Now, I'm not saying you have a massive antenna, but a small antenna will certainly improve it. And my friend Edmund Spicer, who's often on the podcast, will confirm that one. I've seen him out with them. One thing you can do, which really improves reception and transmission, in my opinion, is to fit a counterpoise onto the antenna, or onto the radio. This can be done with one of the crimp connectors, which is like a round ring, and you crimp the cable on. Now, I've certainly done it with 2 meters and 70 sems. I've also made one with both bits of wire on. Now, it doesn't look pretty, and I'll give you, it might not look as pretty as you think it should, but I've had experiences where I've only just been able to get into a repeater. It's been very scratchy and only just been able to get into it. Put the counterpoise on, and bang, it's coming back S9. So, it will make a difference, and it's worth a look. And the other thing is, if you're going to connect an external aerial, something like a small Yagi or whatever, think about having a small bit of feeder cable with the right connectors on, because you don't want some big heavy antenna connector directly connected to your Handy Talkie, because that's a recipe for disaster. You potentially could break the antenna socket or break the electrical connections on the PCB. So try and do some strain relief and make sure you haven't got big heavy cables connected directly to your radio. Batteries are another big problem for us, and let's be honest about it. I would suggest making sure that you check the battery voltage before you start your QSO. Make sure that you've got plenty of power left, because there's nothing worse having a conversation, either having to cut it short, or you fail, your battery fails on you, and the person at the other end's thinking, what's gone on? And they're calling you saying, have you failed? Has the battery died? You know, it's worth checking in advance. Now, I do know that, and I will tell you this, battery voltage drops very quickly in cold weather. So even if you've got a fully charged battery and you can run for hours in the summer, go out in the winter when it's frost or snow on the ground, that battery won't last anywhere near as long as it would in the summer. So just be aware, cold batteries will often drop very quickly. Now you could use a battery eliminator, something that, say, plugs into a car cigarette socket, or a power supply. That would potentially be an option if you were out and about. Another option is an external battery pack, and some radios allow you to fit external power onto them. Useful if you are going to do a lot of use with a Handy Talkie. Now, some radios also have the ability to have a battery pack that takes AA cells. Now, I've certainly got 2 Handy Talkies that do this, and if you think about it, as long as you've got a sufficient stack of AA cells, be it rechargeables or standard AA cells, you could just change the batteries. Every time it goes flat, you just change the batteries, and you can get AA cells pretty much in every country worldwide. So I don't think that would create you a major problem. And equally, it could be that if you're travelling light to another country, you're not carrying a charger unit, because you can buy your AA cells out there. And the other thing also worth thinking about on batteries is a lot of radios have battery saver modes. So you can actually put your radio into battery saver mode, and it goes to sleep when it doesn't hear a signal and only wakes up every few seconds. That's good, but there are some problems with that. So just be aware you could miss a QSO. Now, accessories. Well, the dealers like to sell you accessories because, in fairness, they make more money on the accessories per pound than they do on selling the radio. And I'm not knocking them for it, they've got to make a living. However, the most important probably accessory you need to buy for any Handy Talkie is a programming lead and software. So as long as it's a modern radio, it'll have a programming lead and software. That is probably your best option. Do you go with a Bluetooth option? So Bluetooth or not Bluetooth if the radio's got it? Now, it's your call. I guarantee you'll never fit it after you've purchased it. So if you're thinking you're going to use your radio with, say, your car audio system, and you've got a Bluetooth connection in your car and you want to use it that way, buy it with Bluetooth in advance. If you're never going to have to use it, then don't buy it, but it's an option. Speaker mics, also another option. You know, they're quite cheap often on the internet. Sometimes they have very poor transmit audio. That's often used to the electrac mic insert. But yeah, pays your money and it takes your choice. The cheap ones can be a bit hit and miss. It's up to you. Same with headsets. You know, you could use a headset and it's just with a PTT on it. That could work as well. Now, carrying cases. What I mean by that is more the case that protects your radio while you're out and using it. If you're at home and never going to take your Handy Talkie out, then you probably don't need a carry case. If you're taking it out in the bag, you're using it out and about, then you want to protect your investment, and the case is certainly worth the money. If the manufacturer or nobody makes a case for it, then I suggest getting a piece of cloth and wrapping the radio in the piece of cloth before you put it in your bag. That saves screens getting scratched and things getting rubbed off the radio. So certainly cases are useful. Fast chargers, certainly a useful device. And, you know, we all have got very little time to wait. So a fast charger could be a good option. Car chargers, if you're going to use it, or take it out in the car and go from there. So, and we've already mentioned antennas. You know, the various aftermarket antennas you can get. Moving on to repeaters. Well, you need to program your radio for the repeaters in your area. Now, I say in your area, you might find in a 50-mile radius from your house, there's, say, 20 or 30 repeaters. If they're the ones you're likely to use, program them in, and you've got them already set up. But I also suggest you learn how to program the radio from the front panel, so that if you go somewhere else, you can program a new repeater in from the front panel and take advantage of being in a different area. Now, you may want to take a printed list or have a smartphone app telling you what repeaters are in what areas. There are various ones of those about. If you've got a smartphone, you can look up and see what apps show you what repeaters, or just take a list of paper. But don't forget, as I said earlier, listen and look before you transmit on a repeater. It might be a dual mode one. It might be in a completely different mode that you can't use on your radio. So just be aware of that. Right, moving on. Do you go analog or digital? Well, yeah, that's one option. But equally, let's start off. VHF, UHF, or both? Well, in fairness, I would go with both. Because a dual mode Handy Talkie for VHF and UHF isn't that much more expensive, and there are very few radios that are made just VHF and UHF, so you're better off with a dual VHF UHF. Analog or digital, or both? Well, some radios are analog only, and if that's what you feel and that's what your budget is, you're locked into the analog world. Others are digital, and a lot of digital radios have analog as well. Now, at time of recording, there are 3 major digital modes. I know there are more than that, but there are 3 major modes. Those being D-Star, DMR, and Yaesu Fusion. Now, they all have their advantages and disadvantages. I would suggest the most difficult one to program is DMR. It's a Motorola original design. There are amateur radios that make it a little bit easier for it, but if you've got an original DMR, then you have to spend a lot of time programming the radio. D-Star was developed by the Japanese Amateur Radio Society, and it works very well, and most people are quite happy with it. The last one, which was of the big 3 that came to the table, was Yaesu Fusion. Now, in my opinion, Yaesu Fusion is the easiest one and gives the best audio quality. However, when looking at which digital mode do you want to operate, you got to consider 2 things. Which repeater's in your area? So it's no good going out and buying a DMR repeater, for argument's sake, if there's no DMR repeaters in your area. So look at what you're going to buy based on what's in your area. Now, if you get a digital radio, a Handy Talkie, one of the options which I should have put in accessories is a hotspot. Now, I can hear you all shouting, that's not real radio, and probably correct, it isn't. However, if you've got a repeater like I have a mile away from my house, I think it's a bit rude of me to tie that repeater up, locking it to a talk group that I could do just as easy in my own on a hotspot. So when I'm out and about mobile, I'll definitely use the repeater. When I'm at home, I'll often use the hotspot. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is uses of a Handy Talkie. Well, why not slip it in your pocket when you go out for walks? You know, there are places where the mobile phones just don't work. And don't be surprised, I live in the south of England, and there are lots of places, although it's very, very heavily populated, where the mobile phones don't work. Yeah, you can use it to connect to repeaters while you're out and about. You can also connect to a hotspot. And some people take hotspots along with them and plug them in wherever they go. Other things, some of the radios actually do APRS. Now, if you're into APRS, Automatic Packet Reporting System, you can send packet information, and you can also track yourself, see where you've been. They're certainly very useful at rallies for chatting to your mates and finding out where they are and where the best deals are. So that's another very use. For those of you who are into emergency comms, I'm sure you would find that they're very useful for emergency communications. Pick up your Handy Talkie and away you go. One other that you might not have thought about is, why not use them for satellite communications? The FM birds, all right, with a arrow antenna or an elk antenna, they are pretty good to have a go at the satellites because you've got a dual band transceiver in your hand. So just a few thoughts on the Handy Talkies. And hopefully, for those of you who haven't thought about some of these things, they might be of use to you. Equally, what I will reiterate, though, many, many times, if you go to use your Handy Talkie on a repeater or a mobile radio on a repeater, please not only listen, check the signal meter on your radio to see if there's actually a signal going through, because you might just stomp all over a digital signal and our licensing says we're not supposed to cause interference. That doesn't mean to everybody else except amateurs. It means amateurs as well. So, in fairness, enjoy using a Handy Talkie. Get it out and use it. Maybe put it in the car so you've got it when you're out and about and you've got a quick 10 minutes and you can operate for a quick 10 minutes. You never know. There are people out there. There are new people coming into the hobby that have probably bought a 2m77 handheld that are looking for you. So the idea is enjoy using them. I hope this has been of interest.
The ICQ Podcast. Getting it said for amateur radio.
Well, Dad, thanks a lot there for this episode's feature on how to improve your Handy Talkie. As always with these interesting features, there's always something there that always helps everybody. So as much as it might be the fact that you've got some of those things done already, I'm sure you found one or two things there of interest. Would you not agree, Dad?
I'd hope so, Colin. In fairness, I don't have all the answers, but I thought it was either useful for new hams or thought-provoking for us who've been around the hobby quite a little while, and just some sort of sensible tips, really.
Yeah, exactly. Now, talking about thought-provoking, we got a bit of feedback from our last episode. Tom contacted us via the Facebook group, and Tom's call sign is VK3 Foxtrot Tango Oscar Mike, and he picks up on a couple of things from our listener Q&A. In relation to one of the questions in relation to having your license removed if you're convicted of a criminal offence. So he gives his personal opinion, and he says that people like sex traffickers and murderers should be left out of the amateur radio hobby, but people who make small mistakes in life should be able to have their amateur radio ticket continue. He said, keep up the good work, interesting topic, and love listening to the show. So I think it goes back to really what we were saying there, Dad, is that in one respect, removing the license doesn't really solve much, for the simple reason the fact is that once you have the technical knowledge and the access to the hardware, how do you necessarily stop someone being on the air? I mean, we can probably shun known people or whatever it be that are undesirable in terms of Hamfest and the rest of it, but it's not necessarily a hobby where you can remove someone like that, is it?
No. And that's the difficult one. The other thing is that why I may agree with Tom on the sort of people that shouldn't be allowed licenses, the problem is it depends on your point of view. I got shown a video at work the other day by one of the customers that I'm a red-blooded male. I was not being a prude, but equally it was inappropriate at the time. So what I'm kind of saying is, if you've got a human that's making that decision and saying, right, this person can, this person can't, depending on circumstances and the person who's making the decisions' morals, you could have somebody that would stop you from the license because you have a parking ticket, through to somebody saying, well, murderer's done his time, he's been in prison, why should I worry, sort of thing. So it's a difficult one, Tom. I think, it's, I haven't really answered it, but I think it's a difficult one in that it comes down to the individual, and you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, I would suggest. What do you think, Colin?
No, I agree. I mean, this is where we could do with Frank on this one, because Frank's background in sociology and understanding people, etc. is because end of the day we're seeing this across the pond at the moment with the council culture now, not without going down the political route of rights and wrongs and all the rest of it. People are being removed from social media and, for comments being made, whatever, which you could argue are freedom of speech issues or freedom of access information issues, and then who makes that arbitrary decision. And the other thing as well is what's right today is wrong tomorrow. And I suppose my biggest example of that would be in society is once upon a time it was acceptable to smoke in bars and restaurants, etc., because it was a legal product and people smoked, and nowadays it's illegal. Whether or not that's right or wrong could be argued on many, many different levels. And I'm sure still is today, even though we're many years on for that ban coming into place in many, many countries in the Western world. So it's just such a difficult one. I think it's interesting, but I'm sure it's with all these things, people have a example where they would basically hold that up as today's example of morals or standards, whatever it be. But I'm sure that would always change. But I say the main thing is again, we generate interest and information. More than anything else, I think Chris, when we were talking about that in the last episode, was saying about the vital importance of clubs and organisations doing their background checks to make sure that potentially undesirable people don't take positions where they could be close to vulnerable people or close to people where those type of convictions could be coming to the fore. So potentially maybe it's looking at controls and controls and methods in place to make sure that, as say, if you have done something undesirable, if you are potentially a risk to vulnerable people, that we make sure that those people have reduced or minimised contact to those people. My God, we got heavy on this. Let's try and let's follow on. So Tom also comes back to the second idea about improving his numbers in the amateur radio hobby. He talks about the increasing participation in schools and promote STEM aspects. Make amateur radio more visible to the public. For example, don't hide your antennas and operate in public places like parks, beaches and town squares. Go off into some of these site aspects of amateur radio like microwave and things like Raspberry Pis and software developments. So basically saying, think more about the hobby rather than HF, because if you show people they can talk, all they're going to do is pull out a mobile phone. Show people all the other stuff you can do, and they'll realise that talking is part of that process as well. Things like home brewing and being a good ambassador for the hobby. So in his opinion, one of the big problems to new entrants to the hobby is the bashing of foundation standard licenses, and this needs to stop for the numbers to go up. So again, I think we touched on that as well in the last episode, that as well, making the hobby welcoming to everybody, but at the same time promoting all the, shall we say, the non-speech aspects to get people interested, because speech is sort of a given, and then maybe promote the other stuff on there.
Yeah, but and Tom makes some good points, but the best one I think there is get out there and be visible. I often get quizzed on the antenna on the back of the car. I'm driving your mum's car at the moment. That's got an antenna on it. And people say, well, how comes you've got two antennas on the car? And I say, okay, that's what I do. And they go, oh, yeah. How far can you get? And I say, $64 million question, But being visible, being able to do things, being able to show people, and it would be nice to do other things other than just voice, but don't be put off if that's all you've got, if you've only got a Handy Talkie with you at the time and you want to operate. There will be people come up to you and ask you about it, and if you're in a repeaters range, they go, oh, you can actually do that on one of those, and you go, yeah, because when you think about it, the mobile phone really only goes like a few hundred meters before it drops into the phone network. So be visible, I would suggest, Tom, and I like your ideas about doing other things.
No, agree entirely, as you say. Again, if you take the mobile phone, it's a given we make mobile phone calls on it, but there's all these other things we can do, and I think it's looking at other areas that we can pull those ideas from. So good shout there, Tom. Many thanks for your feedback. Now, as always, we'd like to thank our donors that keep this podcast advert free. So we'd like to thank the monthly and annual subscription donors, for helping us pay our way. If you've enjoyed the show and find some value from it, please consider going to www.icqpodcast.com/donate. We'll say anything you send our way to show your value for the show, and what you got from it is always greatly appreciated. As always, we'd like to thank Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3, Bravo, for taking part in the News Roundtable with you. As always, you can keep up to date with what we're doing by following us on our Facebook groups, sign up for our newsletter, or checking us out on Twitter. That's at Colin Butler and at NMRB. Say all the news and information that we'll publicise over the coming few days between now and the next show will be there for you to check out from there. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up everything from our end, Dad. I can't think of anything else we need to let anyone know. So I'm going to let you head off and do that very important task of making Mrs. B a cup of tea and seeing if you can find her a nice little treat to go with it.
Yeah, okay, Colin, no problems at all. Well, we'll find Mrs. B a treat for a cup of tea. I haven't been in the cupboard, so actually it's Mrs. B who buys the food in this house, so I'll see what she's bought to be given as a treat. Hi. So, yeah, and I know she spoke, passed a greetings message to Phil last weekend, so, yeah, if she's around and you guys call, you might get a greeting message from Mrs. B. So there you go. Back to you, Colin.
That's wonderful. So listen, guys, I'll bid you all 73s, and we'll catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
73.